The highway was empty at 3 a.m. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight, left Zurich at 9 the previous night, and the only thing keeping me awake was anger mixed with caffeine. Sarah had finalized the divorce yesterday. 8 years of marriage signed away on legal paperwork. She kept the apartment, the dog, I kept the job. €500,000 a month to guide wealthy men into dimensional spaces they shouldn't access. The car was a rental, nondescript, the kind you forget immediately. I'd made this drive once a month for the last 3 years, which meant I'd made it 36 times, which meant I knew exactly how long it would take to reach the facility in the Alps Suisse and exactly how long I'd have to wait before the nightmare started. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah's lawyer about final asset distribution. I didn't read it. I just kept driving. The sign appeared around 4:47 a.m. Alpine Research Institute, authorized personnel only. I pulled onto the maintenance road. The facility wasn't hidden exactly. It just existed in a place where nobody thought to look. A concrete building cut into the mountainside. The kind of structure that had been built in the 1970s when government funding cared more about functionality than appearance. The job paid for the divorce. That was the trade-off nobody explained when you sign up for convergence travel. My phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah's lawyer about asset distribution. I didn't read it. Just kept driving through the Alpine Pass with my hands tight on the wheel, and my mind already partially somewhere else. Partially in the place I'd been visiting once a month for the last 3 years. Partially in hell. The facility entrance appeared around 4:47 a.m. Just a small sign that said, Alpine Research Institute, in letters designed to be forgotten. I pulled onto the maintenance road. The road was better maintained than it appeared, climbing steadily toward the mountain. The building itself was concrete and institutional. The kind of structure that had been built when government funding cared less about aesthetics than about functionality. I showed my ID to security. The guard didn't really look at it. He recognized my face. I'd been making this drive 36 times, once a month for 3 years. The elevator descended. That was always the moment when reality started negotiating with itself. The descent lasted far longer than the building's physical structure should have allowed. After the 200-meter mark, the elevator just kept going. Down past sub-basements. Down into spaces where the normal rules of architecture had been renegotiated by technologies that weren't entirely human in origin. When the doors opened, I was standing in the portal chamber. The air smelled like ozone and something organic. The walls were smooth and reflected colors that didn't have names. Dr. Reeves was waiting. She looked like she hadn't slept, which meant either the last expedition had gone wrong, or she was anxious about this one. You look terrible, she said. Divorce finalized. I'm sorry. Don't be. This job paid for it. I tried to smile. It didn't work. How many clients? 7. All billionaires, all repeat customers, all specifically requesting hell. I nodded like this was exactly what I'd expected. Any of them problematic? There's always someone problematic. She handed me a tablet with client profiles. 7 names, 7 backgrounds, 7 reasons they'd each paid €200 million to walk through hell. One of them, Marcus Whitfield, wrote in his intake form that he wants something transcendent. He's hoping to push boundaries. He's prepared to cross the protection line if necessary. They always think they're prepared. Then they understand the cost and it's usually too late. She pulled up another file. Before you guide them, you need to understand what makes this expedition different. We're adding a secondary stop. Secondary stop? The clients will spend 2 hours in hell, as standard. But before extraction, they'll get a 30-minute viewing window of the afterlife dimension. To show them what we also offer. To demonstrate the contrast, I understood immediately. Show them hell first. Show them the consequences of their choices. Then show them the afterlife, a place where the wealthy could be reunited with deceased loved ones, where death wasn't an ending but a transition to something that looked almost like hotels and administrative offices. A place where your money didn't matter, but somehow your social position remained intact. How does the protection work for afterlife? I asked. The same priests and shamans maintain the boundary, but the afterlife is more stable, less likely to consume visitors. The protection is more of a formality there, and if someone wants to stay, in either dimension, then they stay. That's the risk they accept when they pay for the expedition. I nodded and headed toward the preparation chamber. The history I'd been given the complete briefing when I was first hired 3 years ago. Convergence travel was founded in 1948, but the actual technology predated that by 3 years. In 1945, American military forces found something in a bunker beneath Berchtesgaden. Alien technology. Not for weapons, for creating seams between dimensional spaces. The reverse engineering took 2 years. By 1947, they had a prototype. By 1948, they'd commercialized. The people who understood the implications of dimensional travel understood that this technology couldn't stay secret forever. Eventually, it would leak. Eventually, someone would figure out how to use it. So instead of hiding it, they monetized it. They created convergence travel as a front company, a way to control access while making obscene amounts of money. The owners were wealthy industrialists with military connections. Their names were never public. Rumors said they were Illuminati families. Lendas dizem que eram as famílias mais poderosas do mundo. But nothing was ever verified. They operated through layers of shell corporations and legal structures so complex that nobody could trace the actual money flow. The technology was real, though. The dimensional bridges were real, and the destinations they could access were carefully chosen. The afterlife was the first destination they'd developed. Not heaven exactly. Not purgatory in the traditional sense. It was a space that existed adjacent to death. A place where consciousness seemed to persist after the body ceased functioning. Vast cities existed there. Technological, modern, but populated with people who'd died decades ago and somehow remained aware. Somehow remained capable of interaction. Wealthy people loved the afterlife. They paid enormous sums to visit it, to see if their dead relatives remained conscious somewhere, to understand what came next. The package sold itself. 2 hours in the afterlife cost 100 million euros per person. Then hell became available. Nobody was quite sure how the hell access had been developed. Reeves had told me it involved the same basic technology but applied to a fundamentally different dimensional space. A space that seemed to have its own intelligence, its own agenda. A space that was interested in human consciousness specifically because human consciousness was capable of guilt. Hell was cheaper than the afterlife, 200 million euros per person, but far more popular. Rich men paid double the price specifically to experience hell, to have their certainties destroyed, to face the consequences of their choices made manifest in a space that had no interest in comfort or redemption. Nobody really understood why hell was preferred, but the business model worked. Convergence Travel was making more money off hell expeditions than any other service they offered. The shamans and priests. The shamans were trained in various traditions: Tibetan, Peruvian, Thai. They understood how to maintain protective boundaries in dimensional spaces, how to anchor consciousness to the present moment, how to create barriers that hell couldn't easily cross. The priests were more varied in their expertise. Some were Catholic exorcists, some were Orthodox, some were from traditions that had nothing to do with Christianity. What mattered was that they understood ritual, that they could maintain chanting, that their faith, whatever shape it took, could be weaponized into protection. Together, the shamans and priests created a bubble of enforced stability, a space where human consciousness could exist without immediately fragmenting under the weight of hell's influence. It didn't always work. People died. Not physically usually, psychologically, consciousness fragments, awareness dispersals. Things that looked like death, but existed in dimensions that medical science hadn't developed terminology to describe. The clients. I met them in the preparation chamber. 7 men in white suits. All over 60. All wealthy enough that normal experience had stopped being interesting. Whitfield was in his 70s, pale skin, hands that trembled slightly. He had the look of someone searching for destruction and finally finding a way to purchase it. The others fit similar profiles. A Chinese pharmaceutical executive who'd made his fortune in markets where ethical considerations were optional. A Russian oligarch with cold eyes and expensive watches. A tech billionaire whose algorithms had predicted human weakness and optimized for it. A Brazilian banker. A Saudi prince. A man whose background was entirely redacted. "Welcome," I said, using the greeting protocol. "My name is Sutherland. I'm your guide for this expedition. The priests and shamans will explain the protection protocols. What you're about to experience is real. It will affect you. It is not hallucinogenic. It is a dimensional space that exists adjacent to our reality." "And if we want to leave early?" the Chinese executive asked. "You can exit any time. As long as you remain within the protective circle maintained by the priests and shamans, you'll be safe. If you cross that boundary, you're on your own. Convergence travel cannot and will not protect you beyond that point." "What if we want to cross?" Whitfield asked. "Then you'll experience the consequences of that choice." He smiled. That smile told me everything. This man was going to cross the boundary. The portal sequence. The shamans started chanting at 5:47 a.m. The priests began reciting Latin phrases. The symbols on the floor glowed, and the seam opened. Not a doorway. Just an admission that reality was permeable. "Stay close," I told the group, "and no matter what you perceive, remain within the circle." We stepped through. The transition was immediate. One moment, the facility. The next moment, hell. The ground was ash, not fireplace ash, not volcanic ash. This was the compressed remains of things that had been burned until they forgot they were ever anything else. The sky was a ceiling of muscle tissue, constantly contracting and releasing. The light was the absence of light made visible. One of the tourists made a sound like something had broken inside him. "How long?" Whitfield asked. He was smiling. 2 hours. Then we moved to the afterlife dimension for 30 minutes, then extraction. And if I don't want to return, then hell will make that decision for you. We started walking deeper into that space. The screaming started before we'd taken 10 steps. Not from the tourists, from the space itself. Sound that existed in layers. High frequencies that made your teeth ache. Low frequencies you felt in your chest cavity. And beneath it all, a silence that was louder than the screaming. A silence that meant something vast was holding its breath. "Stay together," I said. "The boundary extends approximately 20 meters in every direction. As long as we remain within those parameters, you're protected." Father Nathaniel was walking backward, holding his crucifix high. The inverted light that radiated from it created a negative space. A zone where hell's normal operations seemed temporarily suspended. The 3 shamans had formed a moving core around us, their chanting creating a harmony that shouldn't have been possible given the acoustic properties of this space. The tourists were processing the transition at different speeds. The Russian oligarch had vomited almost immediately after arriving. The Saudi prince was muttering prayers in Arabic. The tech billionaire was trying to document what he was seeing, reaching for a phone that wasn't there because technology didn't function in interdimensional spaces. The Chinese executive was perfectly still, which worried me more than the others. Stillness meant he'd already begun to understand something fundamental about his presence here. Whitfield was walking with purpose, moving deliberately deeper into the protective circle's edge, testing the boundary. Stop, I said. We're maintaining formation. I want to explore, he said. I paid for the full experience. The full experience happens if you stay with the group. Split up and you die, not metaphorically. He slowed, but remained at the edge of the circle. A negotiation with the rule. Hell understood negotiation. The landscape was becoming more defined as we walked. The ash beneath our feet had developed texture, ripples, formations like the surface of something actively breathing. The ceiling of muscle tissue above us was contracting more frequently, pulsing. The rhythm was irregular in ways that suggested pain or agitation. A shape moved parallel to us, about 30 meters away, geometric, impossible. Edges that didn't connect properly. Angles that suggested too many dimensions folding into three. Don't look at it, I said. But the banker, I realized I'd been thinking of them by profession rather than name, which was probably for the best, was already looking. His eyes were tracing the geometry. His expression was changing. I know what that is, he said quietly. A demon approached the boundary. It was watching us with features that didn't have consistent form. It spoke, and its voice was layered. Multiple frequencies overlapping. You came to be destroyed, it said to Whitfield. I can help. Step back, Father Nathaniel said. But Whitfield was already moving toward the boundary. The crucifix's light flickered. The protective circle contracted slightly. Whitfield, I said. Step back. Now. He turned to look at me. His expression was peaceful. I came here to be destroyed. If that's what this is, then I'm ready. He crossed the boundary. The effect was immediate. The protective circle contracted sharply. The shaman's chanting became urgent, desperate. One of them, the Peruvian woman, her nose began bleeding. The priest's crucifixes flared with inverted light. Their hands were shaking. Whitfield's body was changing, becoming translucent. His features were rearranging themselves, his eyes becoming multiple eyes, his mouth becoming multiple mouths. But his voice, when he spoke, was still recognizably his own. Thank you, he said. I finally understand. Then he merged with the demon. The two became something singular, something that had been human and was now something else entirely. The protective circle snapped back to its original size. The shaman stopped chanting. The lead shaman, Aom, gasped. Blood ran freely from her nose. Time check, I said. 38 minutes elapsed, Father Nathaniel said. We have approximately 82 minutes remaining in hell. Then 30 minutes in the afterlife dimension. Then extraction. The remaining tourists were staring at where Whitfield had been. The Russian oligarch was backing away. The Saudi prince had begun praying louder. The tech billionaire was repeating, "This isn't real," over and over. It's real, I said. That's the whole point. We continued walking deeper. The protective circle moving through hell like a bubble in a space that actively rejected bubbles. Behind us, the entity that had absorbed Whitfield was following, not approaching, just maintaining distance, learning. The Chinese executive suddenly spoke. I know what I've done. I know exactly what my pharmaceutical company did in rural villages. I know the exact number of people who died from products we marketed as safe when we knew they weren't. Don't, I said. Don't articulate it. But he was already speaking. Already describing crimes committed in boardrooms. Already articulating suffering that existed in dimensions hell understood perfectly. Another shape was already approaching. This one had a more human form but was still fundamentally unstable. Features shifting, reforming. I can show you the cost, it said to the executive. I can make you understand completely. The executive was moving toward it, moving toward the boundary. Stay with the group, I said. No. He walked directly to the boundary. The protective circle flickered as he broke through. The shape was waiting for him. When it touched him, the executive's scream was immediate and absolute. a sound of complete terror and complete understanding happening simultaneously. Then he collapsed. His body remained, but the thing that had animated it was gone. His consciousness had been extracted, removed, left behind in hell while his body continued to function as a hollow automaton. Father Nathaniel was praying over the body. The corpse's eyes were open. Its chest was still rising and falling. But nothing was behind those eyes anymore. "What happened?" the Saudi prince asked. "He achieved understanding," Ayam said. Her voice was strained. His consciousness couldn't survive that level of honesty. We left the body behind and continued walking. The landscapes were becoming increasingly surreal. The formations that had looked almost like buildings were becoming more defined, more intentional, more like architecture designed by something that didn't think in human spatial terms. And the demons were becoming more interested in us. They moved in parallel to our group. Multiple entities, all watching, all learning. The one that had absorbed Whitfield, the one that had ended the executive's consciousness, others that we hadn't engaged with yet, all of them aware that we were temporary guests in their space. "How much longer?" the Russian oligarch asked. He hadn't spoken since arriving. His voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. I checked the chronometer. Approximately 45 minutes remaining in hell. Then we transition to the afterlife dimension. "And the afterlife is safe?" "Safer," I said. "More stable. Designed to accommodate human consciousness without fragmenting it. Because it's profitable," the billionaire said. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face. "We're safe in the afterlife because we're paying customers there. But here, in hell, we're just materials, things to be processed." He was right. I didn't contradict him. We continued walking toward the deepest part of hell, toward the space where the two remaining tourists would either achieve understanding or lose their minds completely, toward the point where I would have to decide whether to try to extract them or simply acknowledge that hell had claimed them. Behind us, hell was learning, adapting, becoming more interested in the specific patterns of human guilt that we carried with us into this space. We reached the seam between hell and the afterlife dimension, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The protective circle was still holding, but barely. Aam was bleeding from her nose and eyes. Father Nathaniel's crucifix had stopped glowing entirely. It was just wood now, just a symbol of protection that had exhausted its usefulness. "Step through," I said to the remaining tourists. The tech billionaire didn't hesitate. He moved directly toward the seam and passed through without looking back. The Saudi prince followed, his mechanical movement suggesting that his consciousness was still partially detached from his body. I went through last. The transition was like stepping out of one room and into an entirely different building. Hell ended abruptly. The afterlife began immediately. The landscape was bright. Impossibly bright. The sky was a perfect blue that seemed to contain its own illumination. The ground was smooth and seemed to be made of a material that was almost like marble, but had a subtle luminescence. And the city spread out before us was vast beyond comprehension. Towers existed in geometries that suggested advanced mathematics. Streets were lined with buildings that seemed to be designed by an intelligence that understood human aesthetics, but had refined them beyond current human capability. There were people walking those streets. Millions of people. All of them moving with purpose. All of them going somewhere specific. "Welcome to the afterlife," I said to the remaining tourists. The billionaire was staring at the landscape with an expression of awe. His fear had been replaced by wonder. The afterlife was designed to do that, to show the wealthy that death wasn't an ending, that consciousness persisted, that their ability to travel and experience and consume continued. The Saudi prince was looking more present now. His consciousness had returned from wherever it had been retreating to. He was looking at the people walking past, and his expression was shifting into recognition. "I see them," he whispered. "I see the people I knew. They're here. They're actually here." That was the afterlife's greatest selling point. The dead were real. Consciousness persisted. And with enough money, you could visit them. Father Nathaniel was checking his crucifix. The negative light had completely disappeared. He looked at me with an expression of exhaustion that suggested he might never be able to guide another expedition. Aom had collapsed to her knees. Blood was still trickling from her eyes, but her breathing had slowed. Her consciousness had started to stabilize. The effort of maintaining the protective boundary through hell had nearly killed her. 30 minutes, I said to the tourists. You have 30 minutes in this dimension. Then we extract back to the facility. The Saudi prince nodded and walked toward the figure he'd recognized. His mother, I assumed. His brother. Someone important enough that he wanted to see them after death. The billionaire stood still, looking at the vast city, looking at the crowds of people, looking at the architecture that seemed to suggest that consciousness had been given permanent form in this space. Then he started walking, not toward any specific person, just deeper into the crowd, deeper into the city, moving with a purposefulness that suggested he'd made a decision. "Stop," I called after him. He didn't respond. He just kept walking. I moved to follow him, but Father Nathaniel grabbed my arm. "Let him go," the priest said. "He's abandoning the extraction." Yes. He's making a choice. The billionaire was moving deeper into the afterlife crowd, moving away from us, moving towards something that existed in this dimension that we couldn't perceive from where we were standing. And then, from the crowd, a figure emerged. It was the billionaire himself, an older version, a version that had died decades ago and had persisted in the afterlife. The younger billionaire was looking at his future self with an expression of wonder and horror. The older version was gesturing for the younger one to follow. The younger billionaire followed without hesitation. The two merged into the crowd and disappeared. "What was that?" I asked. "Temptation," Father Nathaniel said. "Hell tempts with destruction. The afterlife tempts with continuity, with the promise that your consciousness will persist exactly as you are forever." He's staying. Yes. His physical body will remain in stasis at the facility. But his consciousness has merged with the afterlife. He'll exist here permanently now. The Saudi prince returned after about 20 minutes. His reunion with whoever he'd recognized was complete. He looked at peace. Or at least, he looked like someone who had achieved closure. We waited for the remaining time to expire. 25 minutes became 10, became 5. At exactly 30 minutes, the seam between the afterlife and the facility appeared in the air in front of us. "Time to return," I said. The Saudi prince nodded. Father Nathaniel was already moving toward the seam. Aom had recovered enough to stand on her own, though she was clearly unsteady. We stepped through the seam together. The facility. Dr. Reeves was waiting for us in the portal chamber. She looked at the group and her expression didn't change. She'd already known how many tourists we were bringing back. She'd already known the count. 2 extractions, I said. 1 in hell, 1 in the afterlife. Status of the remaining tourists. 1 merged with hell entity. 1 chose to remain in the afterlife. Both consciousnesses retained physical function temporarily, but primary awareness is absent. She nodded like this was exactly what she'd expected. Standard protocol. Their families will be contacted tomorrow. Assets will be processed. I didn't respond. The billionaire's physical body was being carried out on a stretcher by automated systems. He was still breathing. His heart was still beating. But nothing behind his eyes suggested that consciousness remained. The Brazilian banker's body was being carried out on a different stretcher. Same status. Same state. Aom was being escorted to the medical wing. She'd maintained the protective boundary through the entire expedition, despite being pushed to her physical limit. Whether she'd recover her ability to guide future expeditions remained to be seen. Father Nathaniel was just standing in the portal chamber, looking at his crucifix, looking at the empty space where it had once radiated protective light. "Rest," Dr. Reeves said to me. "You've earned it. Next expedition is in 30 days. Standard Hell Dimension Tour." "I was hoping for the afterlife," I said. "Why would you request the afterlife?" "Personal reasons." She looked at me with an expression that suggested she understood exactly what my personal reasons were, and found them irrelevant. "The schedule is set. Hell in 30 days. I nodded and walked toward the elevator. The drive back. I drove back to Zurich through the Swiss Alps with the sun starting to set over the mountains. The same road I'd driven on that morning. The same landscape. But something had shifted in my body. Something had reorganized itself in my consciousness after guiding 3 wealthy men through hell and watching one of them choose to remain in the afterlife. My apartment in Zurich was empty. Sarah's lawyers had arranged for the last of my belongings to be moved to storage. The place felt foreign, like a space that belonged to someone else entirely. I collapsed into bed for 18 hours straight. When I woke up, I checked the Convergence travel system and looked at the expedition schedule for the following month. Hell Dimension. 7 new wealthy clients. 7 new opportunities to guide people toward destruction. I thought about my grandmother, about the funny stories she used to tell, about the fact that she died 7 years ago, and I'd never paid the money to visit her in the afterlife. I could request an afterlife expedition for myself, could use my employee benefits, could spend 30 minutes in that vast city trying to find her among millions of people. But something in me knew that if I did that, I wouldn't come back. So instead, I rested. I waited. I prepared myself mentally for the next expedition. Because that's what guides do at Convergence Travel. We survive one journey and we wait for the next one. We accumulate the exhaustion. We accept the payment, and we sign up again. And we hope that the next trip might be different. That the next month the itinerary might change. That we might get to visit the afterlife after all. That we might finally get to see our grandmother and hear her funny stories one more time before the cycle starts again. But we know it won't happen. We know exactly where we'll be next month, in hell.